Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's HFM webinar, Align Your Career with FutureMe. As you join, you can use the chat box to just say who you are and from where you are. I'm Elmi Castleman. I'm from Golden Key International Honor Society. I'm the Director for Southern Africa. And for those who just joined us, welcome. And you can put in the chat box your name and from where you are. Thank you. So as people join, we will just give a couple of minutes for everybody to join the call. I see I've just got new members that joined. I'm Elmi Castleman from Golden Key International Honor Society, and please announce in the chat box who you are and from where you are. At the bottom of the screen, there's a feature that says chat, and in there you can just put your name and from where you are. Kimberly from University of Western Cape, Valentina from Port Elizabeth, welcome. Catherine from UWC, Jessie from UWC, welcome all. Tembekile from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, welcome. So we have presence from the University of Western Cape, the Eastern Cape, PE, and also KZN. I'm going to give 3 more minutes. For those who just joined, please just announce who you are in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. You will see the chat feature. You can just say who you are and from where you are. For those who've just joined us, welcome. Ranira Singh from Johannesburg, good to see you. Good to have you here. We have also a Benjamin from Johannesburg. He's a second year biokinetic student at the at the Nelson Mandela University. Welcome. You can use the chat feature to just say who you are and from where you are. We'll give another minute or two. I assume microphones are muted here. I don't want to cause unnecessary noises. Yes, you can mute your mic, but we can't hear you, but you can use the chat feature to talk to us. Okay, Janthan, maybe we can start. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for making time to attend our Golden Key International Honor Society webinar in collaboration with HFM. Today, we're going to talk about Align Your Future with FutureMe. And we are very fortunate, and I always enjoy Janthan Naidu. He's a senior organizational psychologist, and he will present today. He's also the country manager from HFMtalentindex South Africa, and he will be providing detailed information into the users of HFM Talent Index tools, including the FutureMe assessments, with a focus on how these tools can add value to your personal development. Janthan will also be sharing his development insights gathered from his experience working in the talent and consulting fields for over 18 years. Thank you very much, Janthan. We really appreciate that you spend time with us. We do know we're all busy at this stage, but thank you very much for always supporting Golden Key. With that, I'm going to hand over to Janthan. And thank you, Janthan. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elmi. Always a pleasure to be interacting with Golden Key members. I just want to confirm that you can see my screen, so everybody can see the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the third in our series of webinars. In the first webinar, we gave you a general overview of assessments within the talent management space, and we also very briefly touched upon the various reports that have been made available to you via the Golden Key web shop. Then in the last webinar, we went into some detail on the top 5 report, the Competencies top 5 report, as well as the talent scan report. So those 2 reports are made available to you complimentary, and that is via Golden Key International Honor Society. Today, we're going to look at the third type of report that is available on the system for you, and that is called the FutureMe. And the next webinar will look at the last type of report that is available to Golden Key members, namely the Learning Agility. So the top 5 and the talent scan report are designed to give you some insight into your strengths and therefore help you to leverage off your strengths and maybe even to give you some direction about further development in terms of workplace skills. The FutureMe report, however, is a little bit more specific. It is designed specifically to give individuals information around their potential, their motivations, and their interests, and this is to assist them in career decisions. So if we consider making a decision about your career, so whether it is while you're at school and you're deciding what subjects to take, or after school you're deciding whether to go to tertiary education level or to pursue some other career, it's never a simple decision to make, and it's never an easy decision to make. There are so many factors that we can consider when we are making those important career decisions. And I think some of you will have been involved in some sort of career counseling. Typical career counseling discussion will be multifaceted. Here on this screen, we've just identified some of those criteria that you can consider when you're making your career decisions. For example, very importantly, to think about what is my academic background? Do I have the necessary academic foundation for the career I want to pursue? And then secondly, what is my background like? So what are my values like? What are my interests and so on? Okay. Then for some of us, it might be important to consider our family situation. To what extent does our family influence our career decision-making? And I think for most of us in a South African context, family can be quite important. We don't just make decisions in isolation, but very often we will consult with family and we will take into consideration what the family requirements are as well. Resources, very important to consider resources. We might have lofty ideas about where we want to go and what we'd like to be, but all of that will require resources. So do we have the resources to pay for the academic training involved? Do we have the resources for the time that it will take to actually acquire the qualification that we might want. Then we might need to consider expectations. So firstly, what is the expectations that you place on yourself? And then secondly, does your family have any expectations of you? Does your community have any expectations of you? To what extent is this important to you? And to what extent are you going to allow this to impact on your decision? Okay. Then we can consider commitments. Most of us will be in the situation where we don't have any other family commitments, possibly single, unmarried, maybe no children to think about, so we don't have any other commitments to consider. But there are individuals that will need to take those things into consideration. For those of us that are funding our studies through loans and so on, that's a commitment that we would also need to factor into our decision making. Assessments also can play a very important role in decision making for your career. Not all of us have access to assessments, so you are fortunate that Golden Key is making this available to you. Lots of universities will also make this available via their student counseling centers. So if you do have the good fortune of having assessments available to you, I would highly recommend that you do take that opportunity and utilize assessments. So I want to emphasize that you need to place everything within context. You need to take into consideration all of the factors when you are making your decision about your career. You don't need to be doing this in isolation. You can consult with somebody like a student counselor, like a Golden Key advisor. All of the Golden Key advisors have been trained on how to actually utilize this report to facilitate your decision making. But I think it's quite important that you don't read this report in isolation and also put it in context. So if we think specifically about the FutureMe, it has various applications. I think probably one of the most obvious applications is to inform your choice of subjects while you're still at school. If you know what your ultimate profession is and where you'd ultimately like to be in terms of your career, then it becomes a lot easier to decide what subjects to take at school. And then also similarly, when you are at university, if you are a little bit undecided about your choice of major subjects, then the FutureMe can be invaluable in actually helping you make those decisions. What's more likely to be the case is that lots of you are already within an academic stream. You've already decided what your qualification is going to be, and you probably have a good idea of where you want to be. The FutureMe report is going to help you reaffirm those choices. And secondly, it's also going to help you to refine where exactly you want to be in terms of your profession. So no matter what the profession, these days, there can be specialization within the profession. So for example, if you are studying medicine and you haven't quite decided what your specialization is going to be within medicine, the FutureMe can assist you with that as well. The last application that we have mentioned here is concerning individuals that are already within the work environment, and maybe they are considering a complete change of career. And this could be as a result of processes such as downsizing, retrenchment, or maybe the individual just has the luxury of being able to change careers. The FutureMe will also help them with those types of scenarios as well. Okay, so those are the applications of FutureMe. Where does FutureMe come from? Let's just place it within context. This is our performance model that we did share with you in the first and the second webinars. So just to remind you, on the right-hand side of the screen, we have that block that's called performance. And under performance, we have identified skills, behavior, knowledge, and experience as expressions of performance. When you enter the workplace, this is what your employer is going to be interested in. They want you there for a reason. You have a role to fulfill, and you have to demonstrate your performance in terms of your skills, behavior, knowledge, and experience. What we're saying with this model is that that performance comes from your underlying potential, and the expression of your potential is influenced by internal catalysts. Your potential is coming from your cognitive ability, or put in another way, your intelligence, and also very importantly, coming from your unique personality. The extent to which you demonstrate performance is going to be impacted on by things like what are you interested in, what role do you want to fulfill in the organization, and what do you want from the workplace. So those are your motivations, preferred roles, and interests. We also know from research that the overarching construct of learning agility is going to impact on the level of performance that you're demonstrating. So with today's webinar, we're going to be looking at how does your personality, your motivations, and your interest actually help to contribute towards your performance by helping to frame your choice of careers. This is a screenshot from the FutureMe report. I think this is the second page of the FutureMe report. The questions that the FutureMe report is going to answer for you are threefold. Firstly, it's going to give you some information about your interests. So where do your interests lie? And let's define interests. Interests are those things that you enjoy doing, things that you find pleasant to engage in. Secondly, it's going to answer the question, what actually gives you energy in the workplace? In other words, your motivations. And then thirdly, it's going to give you an indication of what areas are you actually good at. And those are the competencies that we identify. Okay? So we utilize those three areas to actually give you an indication of your career direction. Let's look at each of these individually. We'll discuss each of these constructs separately. And at the end of this, I will quickly go through a FutureMe report so you can have an understanding of what to expect from the FutureMe report. First of all, interests. So this is a word that we all use quite commonly, and we all understand this word. It's something that we will put energy into because we find it pleasant, we find it enjoyable. What I want to point out to you is that interests can be quite broad and quite varied. So a single individual can have interests in a wide variety of topics and subjects. So, for example, I can be interested in the art of graffiti, and I could be interested in rock music. And at the same time, I could also be interested in technology. It doesn't necessarily mean that I want to pursue a career in graffiti art or in rock music. Okay, so all of the other factors will also help to refine what our career choice is going to be. So we helped to identify and narrow down your interests by utilizing Holland's model. So Holland's model has been around for quite a long time, and it's a very well-established model. So that's the reason that we actually utilize the model. And Holland describes 6 different personality types and 6 different corresponding work environments that are aligned to those personality types based on the interests that the individual is expressing. At the bottom of the screen, you see the 6 types that are identified. Okay. So very quickly, the realistic environment means that I enjoy physically doing something. So examples are things like being a car mechanic, being a farmer. So anything that involves physical exertion would fall within the realistic environment. The intellectual environment or the investigative environment means that I enjoy analyzing, I enjoy looking at information. I don't necessarily want to physically be doing something, but I do enjoy that analytical part of the occupation. So if you're an individual who feels that self-expression is very important, then you probably will gravitate towards the artistic environment. The artistic environment is a lot less structured than the realistic or the intellectual environment. If you enjoy working with people, if you get satisfaction from helping people and working together with individuals, then you probably have an interest in the social environment. The entrepreneurial environment is a bit more of a structured environment, but for those individuals that enjoy utilizing their intellectual abilities for self-advancement and for gain, then you probably will align to the entrepreneurial environment. The conventional environment is typically those careers that are quite structured in nature. So for example, auditor, accounting, where you would have to be very comfortable to operate within a very structured environment. So when you take the interest assessment, the interest assessment is quite brief. There's about 36 items in the interest assessment, and it presents you with two choices. So you're forced to choose between two items. And by doing that, we can rank these 6 work environments for you, and we can give you an idea of which of these six environments are most important for you, all the way through to the ones that are least important for you. So that's the interest environment. The second assessment will answer a question about what's important for you in the workplace. What do you want to get out of the workplace? Okay? And this we refer to as motivations. So this is what individuals strive for in their work environment. This assessment is based on a model called Quinn's Competing Values Model. And what this model does is it categorizes 20 different motivators according to 4 different categories. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. So the 4 categories are control. So if it's important for you to be engaged in accurate, precise, detailed type of work, your motivations will lie in that category. If it's important to you to accomplish a task, to be very goal-oriented, if responsibility and status is important to you, then you probably have motivators within the performance category. Then there are individuals that enjoy an energetic, varied, and creative type of environment. So their motivators probably lie within the flexibility category. And then lastly, we have the category of people motivators. So these are individuals that feel it's important to be working with and through people, and it's important for them to be taking care of people within the work environment. So 20 motivators in total, arranged according to those 4 categories. In the next 2 slides, you see a brief overview of those 20 motivators that we do measure for each individual. Okay? This assessment involves you saying to us how important something is to you in the workplace. So instead of a forced choice, this is a sliding scale, and the scale ranges from not at all important to very important. So you'd have to indicate to us how important something is to you in the workplace. On this slide, we have the control motivators and the flexibility motivators. Okay? And you'll see that there are 5 to 6 motivators for each of these categories. Okay? I'm not going to go into detail for each of these, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the different motivators that we do measure in the assessment. On this slide, you see the performance-focused motivators versus the people-focused motivators. Okay, so apologies for that. That's my dog wanting to get her word in as well. Here you see the performance-focused motivators as an example: status. If it's important for you to be considered important within the organization and have high social status, then that is a type of motivator that will probably be identified for you. Okay, that was the second type of assessment that contributes towards the FutureMe report. The third type of assessment is the personality assessment. The personality assessment that we conduct is a full and rigorous personality assessment. However, we are not going to give you a personality report. What we do is we actually interpret that personality report in terms of the different work requirements. And we identify the work requirements in terms of different competencies. A competency is defined as that collection of knowledge, skills, and attributes that are important for a particular work task. So once you've completed the personality assessment, which is based on the Big 5 model of personality, we are then able to align all of your personality traits and characteristics to the different competency requirements, and then give you an indication of what is your potential for that particular competency area. Here you see one example of a competency, namely persuasiveness. So to be persuasive, research tells us that you probably need to score a bit higher on the dominance scale from personality. you probably also need to be a bit higher on cheerfulness and imagination. So if those are the traits that you are showing, then you're probably going to show high potential for the competency of persuasiveness. Persuasiveness comes from our complete library of 44 competencies. Here you see all 44 competencies. It's not really necessary for you to know all of them. If you have an interest in the complete library, make contact with us and we can share this with you. But you can see it's quite a comprehensive library. So for all 44 competencies, we are able to give you an indication of your potential for those areas. Now, your potential across these 44 areas are what we call normally distributed. In other words, most of us will be average on most competencies, and we'll be high on a few competencies and also low on a few competencies. So the FutureMe will give you an indication of those 10 competencies for which you are showing the highest potential. And then obviously for different occupational areas, different competencies will be required, and then we can map those competencies to the career choices. So those were the 3 different areas that the FutureMe is going to comment on. What I'm going to do now is actually share with you a sample report. And Elmi, if you can please tell me if you can still see my screen, and you should be seeing the FutureMe report.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, we can see we see your screen and the report. I just want to remind all participants they can post questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we will respond to those. Thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, so this is just a sample report. When you get your report through Golden Key, it will be branded with the Golden Key logo. And on the cover, you should see your name and the date in which the report was generated. Okay. As with all of our reports, there is some introductory information. So this basically tells you about this report, what is contained in the report, where the information comes from, and what we intend the report for. The report actually starts with a summary of all of the results, and it goes straight into giving you some advice about your career. Okay, so right at the top, you'll see it gives 3 suggestions about 3 broad work areas that this person should consider. So in this example, writing, entertainment, and marketing. So these suggestions are quite broad, and it is intentionally broad because we want to leave many options open for the individual. Those 3 suggestions are based on the fact that the individual has the top 2 interest areas of artistic and social environments. The top 4 motivators for this individual is realization, quality, efficiency, and analyzing. That's coming from the 20 motivators that I showed you. And this individual's top 4 competency areas are service-oriented, planning, devotion to quality, and sensitivity. So of all 44 competencies, these are the 4 that this individual is showing the best potential for. So that is a summary of the results. The report then goes into a bit more detail. On the next page, it breaks it down to show you, for those 3 broad work areas that we identified for you, what is your level of interest versus motivation versus competencies. Now, these scores that you see here, it's not comparing you to any norm group, anything like that, but it's just expressed in this way just to help you compare your level of interest across the 3 suggestions, and similarly with the motivations and competencies. So don't think of it, for example, as 90% interest in this area, but rather look at the relative strength of your interest for writing compared to your motivations and your competencies. So when we look at this, we can see that for this individual, the interest is very high for the field of writing. So we know that the person's really going to enjoy the occupations within that broad field. The motivation fit, however, is not as high. And that means that the person isn't necessarily going to get what they want from the work environment. What does this person want? This person wants realization, quality, efficiency, and analyzing. He or she is not really going to get that much opportunity for those motivators from this field. Okay. Does the person have potential for the skills that are required in this field? And we see that, yes, probably does have the potential because the competency fit is also on the high side. For each of the broad fields, you will also see that we do make some suggestions for specific occupations. This is not comprehensive, so I will suggest that each person also do a little bit more research and also investigate other occupations. So there should be lots of resources available online, for example. You can research what other occupations are aligned to these interests. Just compare the writing with the entertainment. And here you can see this is something that the person is really going to enjoy. Okay, they're going to have lots of fun here. They're not going to complain about being bored in their job. However, entertainment is not going to offer them the opportunity for quality, realization, efficiency, and what was the other one? Analyzing. Okay, so even though they enjoy the work, they're not going to feel fulfilled by the work. Okay? But they do have quite high potential for all of those areas. And then the last one here was marketing. Here you see the person has quite high interest for these types of occupations. It's probably going to satisfy their needs quite a bit because the motivational fit is also slightly higher, and they do have the potential for the skills in these areas. So you as an individual, you will need to decide which of these is the best fit for you. Are you willing to compromise the motivational fit for the interest fit? My recommendation would be to rather try and look for an area where there's a good fit across all three areas. Okay, what's going to happen here, in my opinion, this person is going to enjoy these occupations, but might not stay long in this field because these jobs is not giving them what he actually wants from work. Okay. The writing and the marketing fields are more likely to be aligned to what the person needs from the work environment. That's a summary of the three different areas that we measured. The rest of the report goes into detail of each of those areas. So firstly, looking at interests, it's going to once again show you the 6 fields of work environments that we did measure. It's going to give you a detailed description of the top 2 fields that are relevant for you. Okay? How do we know that it's relevant for you? From the spidergram, here you see all 6 work environments, and further away from the middle that it is plotted, the greater the interest for this individual. So you'll see this individual has strong interest for the social environment and the artistic environment, and moderate interest for the intellectual environment, but almost no interest for the other 3 environments. So that's also important to consider. So what are the areas that I must stay away from? Okay, so probably will not recommend that this person be an accountant or an auditor, or even consider something like farming or mechanics. Okay, that's the interest profile. Then the next section looks at the motivations. Remember, we measured 20 different motivators. So here's the 20 motivators around the 4 spidergrams. And each of the spidergrams is related to a different category of motivators. Okay? So at a glance, you can see very easily that the strongest motivators are for efficiency, realization, and quality, and those are lying in the control category. So we know that this individual thinks it's important to work in a very accurate, detailed, and high quality type of environment. Okay. Compare that with the people focus. You can see very, very low levels of interest here for these motivators. So for this person, it's not important to have support from other individuals in the team. It's not important that he must feel comfortable and at home in the workplace. Status and success, also fairly important for the person, and analyzing, also quite important. So overall, the 4 that came out as most important: efficiency, realization, and analyzing. That was the motivational profile. And then from the personality assessment, which are your top competencies. Okay, so here the first paragraph talks about what is a competency. And here you see a description of the likely behavior of this individual in the top 10 competencies. So remember in the summary, we looked at the top 4 competencies, but when you look at the detail, it actually gives you information on 10 competencies that you have the top potential for. Okay? And what you see here is not a definition of the competency, but it's rather giving you an idea of what is your likely behavior in this specific area. This is quite personalized for you as an individual because it is based on how you scored on the underlying personality scales that contribute towards this competency. So if you compare it to somebody else that had a similar competency identified for them, it's very likely that it's going to read differently. I quite like the fact that it gives you 10 competencies, so it's leaving it quite broad. It's giving you a good idea of the areas that you're showing the top potential for. Okay. I also feel that in addition to helping you with your career choice, this is something that maybe you could even consider using in your CV. So maybe you could have a section in your CV talking about your top areas of skill, and you could maybe copy and paste from the section. Okay, so here you see the description of the top 10 areas. The next section of the report is once again generic. It's giving you the definitions, firstly, of the 20 motivators that we spoke about. So for this person, realization was important, and realization is purposefully working on concrete results. And then finally, it gives you the definitions of the top 10 competencies that was identified for this individual. Okay, so we looked at service-oriented, for example. This is what we mean by service-oriented. And that is the end of the report. Okay, so quite a comprehensive report based on 3 quite comprehensive assessments. Remember, when you look at this report, to also consider all of the other factors that I mentioned, and maybe there are some other factors that I did not mention, but could be important for you to consider when you're actually making a decision about your career. Remember, you can also reach out to the Golden Key advisors within your institution that are trained to actually assist you to read this report and apply this report in your context.
Thank you so much, Jantharan. I also want to remind participants that Golden Key has a collaboration with HFM Talent Index, and we offer the FutureMe assessment at 1,380 Rand, where the normal price is 2,000 Rand. So if you're really interested in developing your own career path, please consider doing that. You will find it in the merchandise shop of goldenkey.org for South Africa, and you can just do it online. We are willing to take any questions if people want to have more clarity. Just use your Q&A feature at the bottom of the page, and you can pose your questions. I do realize that we're slightly over the 30 minutes that you may have thought it is. So if you do not have any further questions, I will allow for a couple of more minutes. Jantharan, I think you've explained it very well. People do not have any further questions, no probing, no exploration questions. So I really thank you for your valuable time. Thank you for sharing your insights with us and your organizational intelligence. We really appreciate that. So with that, next week we have another HFM webinar, and we will then do learning agility as an assessment that we will focus on. So have a good day, stay safe, and thank you for joining us.